I'm building a Nicholson Workbench out of cheap 5x2s. I've already built the leg assemblies, added the aprons, and it's starting to look like a workbench. Today we're starting to look at the top. Let's get this thing put together. So here we are, this is where we're starting. First thing I need to do is add some stretches. This will give the aprons more strength and also support the top when we finally get around to putting it on. So after measuring up and marking out, this is going to be the only part of the workbench where I'm not using 5x2s. When I took down my old workbench, I managed to salvage some 2x4s, which are going to do the job just fine. Now I'm trying to limit the amount of screws that I use in this workbench, but for this I'm going to use pocket holes. Pocket hole screws are going to be going into the apron, so as long as I'm careful when I'm drilling the holes in the apron, I shouldn't have any problems. I'm not going to have any screws going into the top, and that's the most important thing, so I don't foul any planes. And just for a bit of a belt and braces approach, I'm going to add some glue on there as well, and then I'm going to spread that around with my own patented glue spreader. And then once again I'm just going to add some clamps just to make sure that that glue's got nice pressure behind it, and we're making sure this is as strong as possible. Now down in the scary corner of my garage, which is full of cobwebs and router dust, things are a little bit more difficult to hold, so I'm going to use this 90-degree clamp, which is really beneficial. Pocket holes can tend to move around a little bit when you screw them in, especially if you've got loads of glue in there, so this just helps hold everything still, keep your hands free, and really does the job. And down the other end of the bench I am going to be adding a tail vise, so I thought I'd use a 5x2 down there, just so I've got more meat to put the vise onto. Once again I'm going to attach it with pocket holes. Now ideally you want to hide the pocket holes on the inside of the piece, but that would mean that the screws are going to be poking out into the end grain and it's going to give a much weaker joint. So we're sacrificing form for function, putting the pocket holes on the outside, and that's going to give us a much stronger joint down the end. I'm going to reinforce this as well, but once again, belt and braces is key. While that sets up, it's time to start thinking about the top. So first of all, I'm going to have a look at the faces, work out which side I want to be the top, make my selection, and then I'm going to use a carpenter's triangle just so I get the orientation the same and I know where the boards are going to be aligned. Now as you know, construction grade timber is going to have rounded edges on it, and that's not really going to be very good for us getting a nice flat top. So just going to run these through the planer a few times, thin them down, and then give us a nice crisp edge for us to glue up later. I love this thing. So I want to limit the amount of work that I'm doing with a hand plane to flatten this top later, so I need to make sure that when I glue the boards together I'm getting them in as good alignment as possible. So to do that I'm going to add some biscuit joints just with a router, just so I can align the faces as best as possible and save myself a whole heap of time in flattening this down the line. This process does get a little bit repetitive, but don't worry, I'm going to spare you that. So what I ended up doing was gluing the top together into two halves, just so I can handle them easier, and then I'm going to glue them together when actually on the bench when everything's in place. So before I add the top, I'm just going to plane down the stretchers a little bit. I deliberately set them slightly proud so I can plane them down and get a nice flush top. That just means it's far easier than having to align them perfectly with the pocket holes, which can move around at the best of times. So this is the vice screw I'm going to be... oh crap. This is the vice screw I'm going to be using on the end. I got this from Axminster Tools here in the UK. It's got 6 inches of play in it. And I'm just figuring out where I'm going to want this thing so I can put the notch in the top, because that's going to be much easier to do now than when the top is actually glued down. I'm setting this back 4 inches from the edge of the face. and I'm going to be having a 3-inch notch that's going to be cut out, and that's where I'm going to put a wagon that can move backwards and forwards with a dog in it. And then, without drawing too much attention, I'm just going to redraw it after measuring up wrong. Hashtag small workshop problems. Need to get this thing on wheels. Now this cut is a little bit sketchy. It's an 8-foot long board, it's quite heavy, and I can't really see where the blade is. But as long as you only do one sketchy thing a day, you're probably fine. Currently broken my jigsaw, so this is the fastest way I could think to get this notch out. I'm going to drill it full of holes, whack it with a chisel, flip it over, do the same, and then just He-Man my way out of here. Bang, look at that. So I mentioned I was going to add some bracing for the tail vise, so here I am just adding in some L brackets, making sure not to hit the pocket hole screws I've already put in there. Now it's time to start thinking about putting these two halves together and finishing the top. It actually looks like a workbench. Look at how happy I am. So to fit these two pieces together, we're just going to go for biscuit joints, same process. We're not worrying about attaching the top to the base yet, we're just getting this top into one nice slab. Before anyone says anything, I know this is a bad place to put that first clamp. I actually talked to myself beforehand and said make sure to clamp from inside, because that's not a great way to do things, but I obviously forgot and I only realised once I'd actually watched this video back, so do as I say, not as I do. Now I've spent a lot of time researching the best way to attach the top to this base. It's pretty common practice to glue the front to the apron because that's the most important face and you want to allow for wood expansion, so you don't want to glue the other side. And I made the top slightly oversized so it means I can pull things forward and plane back the face to get them flush. I also knew I didn't want to have any screws in the top because I didn't want to run the risk of running a plane into them moving forward. Now it's just time to let that glue set up overnight while I research the best way to fit the rest of the top to the base. The next day I decided to go my own way, and this is the way that I came up with. I'm just going to drill some 12mm holes through the top into the base, and then I'm just going to dry fit some 12mm dowels through to secure the top to the bottom. Now I'm not adding any glue to allow for a little bit of wood movement. If I do need to take them out in the future, I can just drill through them very easily. This top is glued at the front. The weight of the top is going to keep it down. This is really just to resist any twisting motion from racking forces or anything like that. Now the top's on, there's only one way that I know to test a workbench. I'm not a little boy, and this thing does not budge a millimetre. Really happy with this. Now the workbench is nice and solid. Now we've got to make it nice and flat. This is the bit that I've been dreading. If I'm going to do this, you need to make sure that your tools are sharp. Don't be a fool, sharpen your tool. I'm putting this plane back together nice and slowly just to try and delay the inevitable. So what I'm going to do here is start off with a scrub plane using the Stanley number 4 just to take the thick off, and then I'm going to switch to a number 7 jointed plane just to really smooth off the finish. There really is no easy way to do this. And as you can see, I'm just using the edge of the jointed plane to check for flat as I go, removing any high spots as I find them. So one thing with a Nicholson Workbench is you don't just need the top to be flat, you also need the front apron to be flat as well. So we are now preparing to tip this thing on its side. Hashtag small shop problems once again. This thing isn't just heavy, it's a really awkward shape. There's almost nowhere to hold on to. Luckily I can just reach over it. It's definitely a two-person job, and if you are going to do it on your own, make sure you move your spirit level out of the way first. Now at some point this is going to happen. Thankfully I knew it was going to happen, and I managed to get my shins out of the way just in time. And I gotta say, I'm not in a rush to use a plane anytime soon. So planing the top and sides flat almost killed me. And flipping this thing on its side on your own in a tiny space is no joke, but we got there in the end. Thanks for making it through to the end of this video. Hopefully you found it useful. If you did, then why not consider liking and subscribing. Next part in the series, I'm going to be adding the tail vise and start considering work holding on this thing. So look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks again and have a good one.